Okay, the time is 5:06. We'll go ahead and start with our city council workshop. We do have a hearing the residents scheduled here. Is there any hearing the residents for the workshop? All right, we'll move on straight to number one. Item number one, discuss the sales and consumption of alcohol beverages at a city-sponsored event. All right, Councilmember Watson, you requested this one be on the for consideration. I'll go ahead and open up the mic for discussion.
Okay, I wanted to go ahead and start with opening up events in regards to the historical district and park events for alcohol consumption, and talk about going forward a process to be implemented in changing the ordinance for the Christmas holidays.
Okay, Council,
Is this more of like a what they do on like Austin and Maine, or like in New Braunfels, like being able to just do it on one area of the city? Okay. From what area to what area are you want to
So
consider?
the historical.
Just all of Maine, or?
Main Street, and then including the parks during the events.
Okay.
Mr. James, is there currently an ordinance regarding this?
Clear on the request, and I apologize. So is the idea to allow alcohol consumption just during events?
Just during
so
events.
When we have Moving on Main, when we
Yes.
have Jubilee, when we have some festival,
Yes.
the idea is to allow consumption. Okay. So yeah, I think we have the ability to, so here are a couple of questions for you and for council to clarify. So some of you may recall that at Jubilee in the past, and I'll use that as an example, in Pickerel Park, we had the Parks and Rec Foundation. It was a nonprofit that actually kind of worked with the city and put on the event, and they would coordinate to sell alcohol during the event, right? So right now, if you go out to Jubilee and you're not a city employee working the event, you can bring your own alcohol and you can drink alcohol in the park. That's certainly allowed. We have folks do that. I think a few years ago at the Jazz Fest, came up with my wife. We brought a bottle of wine, sat there on the grass and drank it. And so that's currently allowed. So if what we want is for folks to have the opportunity to purchase alcohol, then what we would need to do, and what we've talked about in the past, is partnering with someone who has an alcohol license, who then would get the approval from TCQ for the special event license. And then we would partner to allow them to sell alcohol at the event. And we could do it sort of for a couple ways. One is just first something for folks to have to make the event more fun for them. The other part of it is theoretically there could be a revenue sharing kind of thing, and I think that's part of what the alcohol sales did at the event, right? So we could do something like that. Again, I think in the past the city's preference was always, let's partner with someone who's in that business, knows what they're doing, let them manage it, let them own it, let them make sure they have the licenses and the insurance and things like that. And we'll kind of keep an eye on it from what we understand to be those TCQ requirements when you go to an event, in terms of, to whatever degree the area needs to be defined or roped off or cordoned off or things like that. So if that's the goal of council, we can go back with staff and talk about it. I think probably the thing to think about is, which events do we want to do this at? Kind of going forward, and how does that sort of change the nature of the event, right? In the past, I think my impression is at Jubilee, we may want more police officers out there if we're selling alcohol, which would tend to have more people drinking than we do now. I assume there are probably some events, Easter in the park or something, that you go, yeah, that's not when we want to do it. But find those events where it makes sense. If the direction is for council, for staff to run those traps, we can run some traps on it, come back to you with a report and say, here's how it would work, and get kind of final blessing and direction.
I had some 1899 Leonard from Blue Bonnet was interested in distributing.
Yep.
So at the events. So I did have some, businesses that were ready to start.
Right. And I think we've talked to frankly, to be blunt, Nick Marquez in the past about doing it at Jubilee. I don't remember if that ever panned out or worked out at one point. It was a few years ago. But yeah, we've certainly talked about that in the past and could find something like that.
Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, I'm in favor of it. Again, people have talked about it in the past. For example, Moving on Main, it's an outdoor event. People could buy, it's not that people are going to drink heavily, but at the same time, those that want to grab a plastic cup and walk down the street, you know, it would allow them to do that. And, you know, we don't have to sell alcohol, that, we can let the locals do that. But when it comes to the park, obviously, you know, we used to make a lot of money in the city doing that. Because the two music nights are generally big sellers, and certainly partner with a local establishment and owner that has the licenses, you know, that understands the age rules and things like that, and you know, take a percentage of it and make it a positive thing. But you know, never want to be against it, you know, and it doesn't have to be there to promote alcohol by any means either.
No, I think we need to address each event to see whether or not the council agrees with each event. Now, certainly the Jubilee, we can see that, but moving on Main is supposed to be for wellness, and walking around with a beer in your hand, a cigarette on the other, it tends to send the wrong message as to why we have moving on Main. But that's why I want to make sure that the council has the opportunity to select which events. If there's all of them, that's fine, but I think by selecting the events, we'll probably...
Yeah, so we can come back to you. I know, you know, one of the things you talked about a couple of these workshops ago was when we go into construction with the Moving on Main, maybe we'll move to some sort of concert series, you know, over in the park area nearby, kind of tied into Main. So people go, oh yeah, it's a bunch of stuff going on, city's doing things. And that music fest makes sense to have alcohol sales with. And I know, you know, even got some feedback from some council members that a couple years ago, I think parks in conjunction with maybe cornhole or washers or kickball, one of them had the beer truck come out, you know, for folks who were playing, and they did that on council nights, so nobody on council was able to participate and, you know, whatnot. So we've tried that before too.
I think it's a good idea also. When I think about how we as a city can now, we are a family-oriented city. I think that our residents really respect that and understand that part. I think that there needs to be some sort of differentiation between, we have our family moments, but we also have moments where people can be adults and be in a space where it's a safe area. Now, mind you, this does mean that every resident will have to be responsible for their own consumption and their own, you know, safety and the safety of others. That's just a human nature situation. However, if we can not only employ our small businesses around us that already have a license, that's huge. We do want to make sure that we're connecting to other businesses, as well as allowing for us to have these events where families can come and, you know, if it's movie night, they can have a little margarita or a glass of wine or whatever. I think that's great. I know I went to Jazz Fest this year, and that was great because we could do that. Not all cities are the same, of course, but if it works in Balcony Heights, it works in New Braunfels, it works in Greene, it works in Fredericksburg. I think that it's not something that would take away the validity of us being a safe community.
Right, and I think, as I said, we can figure out which events make sense. You know, so a lot of our movies in the park, they're kids' movies, they're cartoons. Probably not the place to do it, but you know, if we did one for kind of adults, sort of a romantic comedy date night kind of thing, that might make sense. Again, sell wine, sell margaritas, things like that. So we can come back to you with kind of a proposal, our thought, lay out how it would work, lay out the adjustments we would need to make, let you guys give us feedback, and we'll go from there.
Council, any other comments? I guess
Well, we look forward to having a glass of Cavassier out of the city event with you guys.
that is the only topic that we have right here for discussion. So with that, it is now 5:16. We stand adjourned.